guys, welcome back. We got a special guest here tonight. We're going to talk about whiskey things, whiskey adjacent things. But without further ado, we have Mitch Wettle on the show tonight. How's it going, Mitch?
Living that dream. How about yourself, sir?
I'm doing really good. I was kind of struggling to get in here. My son has basketball practice on Thursday night, which is a great time for me to do a podcast. But the issue is I had to feed the dogs, had to feed myself, had to do all these things. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to make it in there in time. But we made it work. It's all good. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and if you want to link any socials or anything like that?
Yeah. Okay. So whiskey stuff. I am a level 3 whiskey sommelier. I'm an executive bourbon steward. I've completed the 6-day distiller course and education course at Moonshine University. I was a cooper for Brown-Forman for 4 years, and I was a distillery supervisor at Heaven Hill for about 4 years as well. Third generation. My grandfather worked at Seagram's. My dad worked at Brown-Forman. So did I for a little bit. Currently, you can find me on My Whiskey Den Monday nights, 9 o'clock on YouTube with Matt and Pike. Oh my gosh, Matt and Pike, Pat and Mike. Well, that'll tell you how nervous I am that I'm
switching
names around. Yeah, all right, there you go.
Yeah. No, it's all good. So the reason I wanted to have you on the show, other than you just being an awesome human being, is the fact that I've been doing this for a year now. I don't know what episode this is going to be, but I'm over 50 episodes in. And I have never had anybody from the whiskey community in other than some people that maybe know some single malt or something like that. But somebody with, I don't want to say paperwork or something behind them, but you've been in the whiskey business for a minute. And so I'd kind of like to go back and talk about obviously you said your dad worked at Brown-Forman, so that got you in the whiskey door. But what made you want to get into, I guess, go back there, but then what made you want to get into the whole whiskey sommelier program and stuff like that?
Yeah, so it's not a super romantic story. I'm not going to lie. I wish it was. It was definitely a story of necessity. So my dad is a forestry major in science. That's what he majored in college, as well as my mother. So he ended up getting a job at the cooperage. And at the time, I was an assistant manager at a grocery store, which did not pay that much. So he was like, well, I could probably get you on at the cooperage and you'd get a raise and then you wouldn't have to manage folks. And I was like, wow, that sounds really great, actually. So I got a job at the cooperage because my dad basically pitched for me, and I got in. It was a union shop, so started at the bottom, started working my way up. Was there for about 4 years, and that's basically how I got into the whiskey business. Then towards the end, they decided they were going to modernize the cooperage. Basically, probably the newest thing that was in there was from the 90s, and most everything else was 70s and before. Probably like 40s or 30s is when it, round about when Prohibition ended was when a lot of that stuff went in there. So they were like, okay, we're going to modernize, and we're probably going to lay off like the bottom third of y'all, which isn't awesome, but they gave us a fair amount of notice, and it was one of those things. I didn't have a college degree. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So it was one of those things where it was like, okay, I probably have like 6 months to a year to figure it out, and go for it before I'm unemployed. So since I had been working at the cooperage, I had really gotten into drinking whiskey and like sampling, right? Like tastings, right? Like that South Park thing. It's like, I'm not drunk, I'm having a tasting. I'm not drinking one whiskey, it's 6. And I started watching YouTube, right? Kind of like learning how to taste and all of that stuff. And I stumbled across the Whiskey Tribe and the Whiskey Vault. Well, at this point, it was just the Whiskey Vault. The tribe hadn't started yet. And I was like, these guys seem pretty fun. Like, I liked it. And then I was like, they do a certification. Oh, sweet. And I started looking in at certifications, trying to make myself look like a better, possible employee for all these things. And I looked into Moonshine University and I looked into them, and they ended up being cheaper than Moonshine University. And I was like, okay, well, I'm about to be unemployed, so I should probably go with the cheaper option.
Right.
So I went down to Austin, Texas to get my whiskey sommelier certification, and I had the time of my life down there. Absolutely. So it became less of a, oh my God, I desperately need a job and I need this certification to help me get it, to like, this is amazing. I learned so much, and it made me passionate about whiskey.
Right.
So, but what about you? How did you get into it? Right.
Okay. We're going to go there. Yeah. So basically I got into whiskey. I was always drinking Crown and Coke. That was my thing. It's just one of those things. And then I decided one day I'd had a little too much Crown with my Coke, if you know what I mean. And so I was like, I need to lay off a little bit. So me being the smart connoisseur that I am, I said, well, I'm going to start putting less Coke in, and then I'll just enjoy the taste of the Crown. Right. So that went on for a couple of months. And then I realized I don't really like the taste of Crown Royal. No offense. So I said, well, and then I too, at that point, found the Whiskey Vault. And that was, good Lord, the early days when it was just Daniel. I don't even know if Rex was in there yet. And saw that he was doing the same thing, drinking the whiskeys like that. And I'm like, I need to do that. So I got some bottles and started, kind of nosing and tasting and doing this. And they were hot and fiery and burning my face off. And then I realized, take it easy, take it slow. And then we just kind of learned. And I've always been intrigued by the whole process of making whiskey, everything from the mashing to the distilling to the drinking to the bottling to even the marketing part of it. And then that's when I went up to the Wizard Academy, which is a lot closer to me than you. When I went up there, I was like, these are my people. They're weirdos, but they're my people.
It takes one to know one, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then I too took the whiskey sommelier certifications, and that's where we're at. I have not done the WSET. I would like to learn more about that if it could advance my career, if is what I'm going to say, because Moonshine U is great. I've heard really good things about it. I know that the Wizard Academy is also doing the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy and all that stuff. So, all of those are great things to have under your belt. It looks really good on a resume. But some people don't really give a crap about it either. They're just like, do you know how to distill, or do you know how to make a barrel, or they want more hands-on experience than, literary experience. So that's kind of
the nice thing was, I got my job at Heaven Hill a lot in thanks to what I learned from the Wizard Academy, right? Because at that time awesome. I hadn't gone through Moonshine University except to become a bourbon steward. So it was one of those things where I was asking questions that they didn't expect to be answered or asked by someone who didn't really have a distilling background. And they were like, okay, well, you know more than we expected, I guess. And it was like, yay, I hope I do.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. So tell us about Heaven Hill, because that intrigues me, because for everybody who's into whiskey or into the whiskey, they love the shiny parts. They love how it's made. They love, we are also the type of people who like to watch that show, how it's made, because I want to know how they make plastic bags or whatever. Like, we want to know that crap. We want to know all of that, the process. So get us into the process and kind of what you did and obviously everybody knows what Heaven Hill is, but like how you fit into their process.
So I was a supervisor, so I wasn't necessarily the person pushing the buttons or anything fun like that, especially since there was a union and there were kind of rules about when I was allowed to push buttons, fun stuff like that. But so I kind of got there. They had just done their third distillery expansion and put in a third column still and 6 more fermenters and a whole bunch of things. And they were running 24/7 basically. And their supervisors were like, ooh. well, we don't want to work 7 days a week. Like, this is already terrible. Thank you very much. No, thank you. So they were looking to expand, and I was one of the folks who got in there. But I mean, let's get nerdy with it and start at the beginning, right? So Heaven Hill burned down their distillery in, I think, 96? I should probably remember that, considering I worked there, but unfortunately I don't. And they were really faced with a choice, right? They could either build a new distillery or buy a distillery, right? Either one that was running or that was, like recently mothballed. So they ended up buying a distillery in Louisville, Kentucky. And it's the Bernheim Distillery, which if you see Bernheim wheat, it's named after the same folks. And it is actually in Kentucky, DSPKY1, which means it's the first plant to have a legal license after Prohibition to distill alcohol. Definitely not the first illegal one. I'll put it that way, right? So basically, they've been distilling there since literally the day after Prohibition, which is pretty cool. It obviously nothing's left from 1933, but it's really cool. So they have these. The thing about Heaven Hill is the size. They are massive, and they crank out an insanely large amount of really high quality whiskey every moment of every day. They are the world's biggest bourbon distillery. Like, Jim Beam puts out more bourbon, but they have 2 different plants. So Heaven Hill snuck in there with that one, right? And just to give you an idea of the scale, they had, let's see here, 8 silos for grain. They had 4 small silos and 4 large silos. And their small silos were the same size as a train car load of grain. So they did that very purposefully at the time, right? Because they were on a railroad spur, and they would just bring in a railroad car of grain a day, or as they needed. Then they got to where they were making so much that the trains really couldn't keep up, and they had to go to trucking it in. So absolutely insane. The amount of grain they use in a year is enough to solve hunger for a small nation. Very impressive. All right, so you receive the grain in, you do all those fun tests. Aflatoxin is a big deal in Kentucky, so it's one of the big tests we did. After we receive it in, we grind it. Really fun. When you grind that much grain, you really run through your mills.
Yes, I'm sure.
And one of the most common things we had was the screens that we would shake. We'd use to shake, the cobs and foreign material out. Would get holes in it because, like a rock would get through it or something like that. And then suddenly in the bottom of the still, you'd just go to start draining it out, and you'd just have whole corn just pouring out of it. You're like, oh, well, hey, maintenance, like, we really need you to check those screens. Gosh, but those mills were intense. They milled probably half an hour out of an hour every day.
Oh, Lord.
So for milling, they went to mashing, right? They could do a cook in an hour and a half. And they had 3 cook tanks, so they would do a cook every 3 hours. And I want to say their fermenters were 125,000 gallons, and it took 9 to fill them up. So they were not small cooks.
No.
It is production, right? Like, they are.
That sounds like it.
They are moving. The other thing is, right, Heaven Hill, obviously they sell a lot more bourbon than everything else. So doing a recipe change is a big deal. Because especially if it's wheated, we didn't normally have wheat there. So we would have to completely empty out a silo in order to run a wheated. Otherwise, we'd be putting not wheat in there and just being like, probably legally still bourbon, Right. They do pretty much a 3-day ferment. It's all closed fermentation. They do no open top fermentation there, just because of realistically the amount that they're fermenting. They have 6 fermenters in a room. They're 125,000 gallons a piece. The amount of carbon dioxide that comes off of one of those, could kill you.
Yes.
So they were like, yeah, besides the terroir of downtown Louisville is probably a little weird. So, I totally get that. And then they had 3 6-story column stills. I want to say they were 5 or 6 feet in diameter. Gosh, it's been so long since I thought about it. Unfortunately, I'm kind of forgetting.
That's okay. This is
but at max output, they could they could distill about 400 gallons of mash a minute. So
that's a lot.
More than one, right?
That's a lot.
Yes, quite a lot. And the wild thing is, so I can't say enough about the guys there because they did not have a way to check proof.
Okay.
From the moment it went from the beer well till it was done through the thumper. Until my last year there. So I forget when, but their thermometers and proof gauges broke, and they were like, just replace the thermometers. We know how to run it off a temperature. So they were like, all right, like that sounds great. Let's save however much money we can. So they ran that entire operation solely off of thermometers.
Holy crap.
3 on the column stills and 1 in the thumper, and they knew what proof. They could tell you within half a proof point what you were going to get off of those stills based off of those. It was darn impressive.
That is impressive. But if you're running the same thing all day every day, then it should act the way you want it to act. So I can see how. I could see how they could get pretty close.
Oh yeah,
that's crazy.
But once again, the scale is something that it's kind of hard to explain.
Yeah.
And then after it came off of the still, they didn't have a bottling line or a barreling facility or anything like that there, because all they did was buy the distillery and like 6 adjacent warehouses. Everything else was not theirs. So they actually had to tanker all of their White Dog to Bardstown in order for it to be barreled, and then because their barrel house didn't burn down and their bottling line didn't burn down. So it was like, why should we spend $1 million to buy something we already have, right?
Right, exactly. So you just got to have tanker trucks to tank the new make over there to put it in the barrels. I mean, which makes sense. I mean, you might have to buy some big rigs, but that's a whole lot cheaper than having to buy a whole new warehouse and set up a whole new bottling facility and stuff, or try and move the old bottling facility that's going to fall apart when you try and pull it apart or something. Yeah, so I can totally see why they did that. So I mean, if you're talking a tanker load full of new make ready to go in the barrel, I mean, you're talking. I can't even imagine how many barrels per hour they were doing.
So right, it came off still about 140 proof, right?
Okay.
And it went in, depending on how many holes there were in that screen, right?
Right.
Because of how much whole grain got in there. A real bad ferment would be like 7-ish, but the highest I think I ever saw was about 11. So they were cranking it out, right? So my brain's not braining real well, but if you're taking it from 10 to 140, and that's 400 gallons, so you gotta divide that by 14. So they're making what, like 60-ish gallons of 140 proof whiskey a minute.
And
then it obviously has to be proof down because bourbon can't go in above 125. So they were making about a barrel a minute.
Correct. I mean, because you talk about some of these, which we're not going to talk about craft, but like you talk about some of these craft distilleries, and they're doing a barrel a day, maybe, or less.
So,
they have to do 2 or 3 runs to fill a barrel. It's like.
So we spoke to Edelbrand Distilling on my whiskey den out of Missouri, and they do brandies and eau de vies, and they run, I think, like, I forget what it was, but it was maybe a like 10 gallons an hour or something like that. And like my mind was just like, what? How? You can, that's wow. And like you taste their product and you're like, well, I mean, I'm not going to cuss, but dang, right? Like you can see the care and precision that went into it. Right. But yeah, like I have seen definitely one end of the spectrum.
That's funny. That's funny. So after it goes into the, so what did you oversee when you were there? What part of
the so from grain receiving to White Dog leaving the parking lot.
Okay. Okay. So you never got to saw the aging or bottling part, or did you?
So very, very rarely. They had those 6 warehouses beside us, and on occasion I would have to fill in over there. And I mean, I hate to be that guy. You've seen one rick house, you've seen them all. Like, but like they were really traditional rick houses. These were brick exterior rather than wood exterior. Okay. And honestly, like the crew over there was, huge compared to the crew at the distillery, because the distillery was very automated, whereas barrel handling is still very not automated.
Yeah. Right. It's very hands-on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then once it moves into the bottling facility, I bet it's all hands on deck there as well. And I'm sure a lot of that is automated as well. But I mean, if they're cranking out a barrel a minute, I wonder how much they're bottling, depending upon the bottling day and what they're bottling. I said it wrong. Really, it should be barreling, right? Because it's going into the barrel. Bottling would be coming out of the barrel. But they had cistern tanks, so they would literally show up with the semi, and they would just pump it into a 10,000 gallon tank, and then fingers crossed you didn't get a bad batch of barrels, and everything went pretty well. You'd roll in an empty barrel, and you'd put the little nozzle in there, and it'd stop automatically. And then you'd knock your bung in there and kind of roll it on. But so when I worked at Brown-Forman, they would talk about bad batches that we put out where there would be ankle deep White Dog in the room where they were filling all their barrels because of just the leaks that they couldn't stop. Holy crap. Now, is that because of barrels not being tested, or is it because they were just too new, or
so it's one of those things where they would tell us it's because of everything we did, right, and we need to do better, right, which is kind of sure, like whatever, it's management's prerogative. But I think it was like, oh hey, that trailer didn't get pulled at the right time. So the barrels had dried out a little bit more than they should have. And then, you put whiskey in them and they need to absorb that whiskey to reseal.
Right.
And whoops.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. We all know that barrels are great for holding liquid, but they have to swell, and they're because all barrels they're just finger jointed together. They're not like screwed and glued and stuff like that. So it's, you have to make sure that it's tight before you put, that's why they water fill them and stuff. So if they're sitting out there for a month waiting for whiskey, they're definitely going to dry out. And that's the other issue is like, once you get the barrel and get it filled, you're expecting some are going to leak. I mean, barrels leak. That's what they are. They're wood. And sometimes you're going to find a hairline, something in it that's not great. But at the same time, like, it should do the job it's supposed to do. So there was obviously something further down the line that wasn't cooperating like it should.
Hopefully, either that, and it's also possible we get like a very bad batch of wood. So it's interesting. So we used all American white oak, and there is a worm that just loves to eat American white oak. And it leaves behind these super tiny pinholes that aren't actually holes, because as it goes and eats, it comes out the other end.
Got it.
And it's a slightly lighter color than the rest of the wood. And it's, just this tiny, and I mean pinhole that is just a lighter color. And you have to watch for those. And if you don't, it gets through, right? And the problem is their poo is basically not water soluble, but it is alcohol soluble. So like you test it with water and you're like, yeah, it seal's great. I don't know what you're talking about. And then the moment they put, White Dog in there, they're like, look at all these holes. What do you mean?
So. That's crazy. It's just spewing out of there. I could just see it just spraying everywhere. That's funny. So I mean, obviously there's a huge difference because every distillery is going to be different. But tell us a little bit the difference between the Brown-Forman and Heaven Hill, like their practices and stuff like. I mean, if you can, I don't want to get into NDA stuff.
So I can't really talk about Brown-Forman's distilling practices because I was a cooper at Brown-Forman, right? Right. The thing was, right, Brown-Forman was very proud of having 2 cooperages that they used to make the overwhelming majority of their barrels. They came out with Cooper's Craft, right? It's a little bit of Schadenfreude for me because after they upgraded, they thirded production at the cooperage. It did not go the way they were expecting it to. So it was one of those like, yeah. Some of us were pretty good moments. But, it's Brown-Forman. It's not like they're going to be like, oh, no, this is totally going to affect anything other than like 4 people's day who will fix it.
Yeah, exactly. So what is the production like at Brown-Forman? I mean, I know they have a large line as well. Is that correct?
So we were mostly making the barrels for Old Forester, Woodford Reserve. We made tequila barrels for their Herradura brand, and then also we helped with Jack Daniels. They had a distillery in northern Alabama that pretty much like everything they did basically went to Jack Daniels because they were closer, and we were closer to Brown-Forman and Woodford. Right. But it's great, right? So let's get nerdy with it again, right?
Let's go.
So you bring in the staves, right? And they're just pieces of wood. They're not even rectangular pieces of wood, if I'm 100% honest. They're vaguely rectangular pieces of wood. And then, they air dry them in the yard as long as they can because they also owned a lot of the mills. So if a mill was like, we're running out of room, it's like, all right, well, we're getting green wood. And then they would kiln dry them. And that makes a really, really big difference in the end profile of your barrel. So effectively what it is the drying process in a kiln is violent compared to natural, and it can burst the cell walls. And basically the cell wall holds in all of those great flavor compounds that you're looking for. The other thing is, right, when it's outside, it's getting rained on. Tannins are water soluble, so it pulls all those out, and then you get all this lovely fungi and other bacteria that is breaking down the bonds between your cellulose, your hemicellulose, your lignin, and then also within all of those things, breaking it down again. And all right, so to get really, really nerdy with it, right? So like you hear about toasting and charring a lot. And the reason those are so popular is because they are kind of the most easily replicable ways of getting thermal degradation of your lignin and other compounds. So if you can toast at the same temperature, you will degrade to the same compounds every time. The problem is heat will destroy everything below that, right? Like if you've got a bond that breaks at 500 degrees and a bond that breaks at 400 degrees, that 400 degree bond will be broken and the rest of it will be burnt to a crisp, and it won't, contribute flavor if you take it to 500, right?
Right.
So toasting and charring is a great way to break them down consistently every single time and super quickly, whereas dry aging will just break those bonds down and it doesn't destroy those, chemical compounds that would get destroyed at a lower temperature. So it lets you get a much more complex flavor.
Right.
Okay. So next to cutting the wood, So a stave when it comes in is always a little bit longer than you want it to be. Wood splits from the edge, from the ends, not from the middle. So it's a whole lot easier to bring in things like 4 or 6 inches too long and then cut off 2 or 3 inches on each side, ensuring that you cut every split out than it is to not and then have to throw away a bunch of split staves.
Right.
Then we'd run them through a planer, and the planer in Jack Daniels was a oh my gosh, it was a converted crown molding planer, right? So it would get, both sides, put that nice bevel on them. Then we would join them. And that's just, all right. So how do I describe this? So barrels are held together with pressure, not with screws or anything like that. So you need those sides to be perfectly or defect free, right? It has to be not rough, all that fun stuff. So you would joint them. And the other thing is barrels have, a barrel shape. They are curved. They are thicker in the middle, slightly like me. And the way that we did that was there was basically a 5-foot wheel with knives in it that spun really fast.
Okay.
And those knives would be at an angle, right? So if you think about a circle that's spinning, and then if you suddenly say, okay, it's not a circle, we're going to make it 3D, right? So you take the center and you push it one way, then you've got a cone, right? So now let's say you've got this cone and you put something in it, right? If you put it in the dead center, it'll eventually go, and then it'll start shaving down the edges before it starts shaving down the center. So that's what we would do. We would set the knives at a very specific angle so it would shave more off of the edges rather than the center. So it would give it that really nice curve.
Got it.
Which was fun because you would have to change them every other day.
Wow.
Let's see here. So after that, right, was the actual raising of the barrels. Brown-Forman is intense. It was very hands-on when I went there. I'm pretty sure it still is. Effectively, you got a really heavy iron hoop, and they would tell you, okay, we set our knives at this. So you are shooting for 27 staves. And you would have to put in 26, 27, or 28 staves into that barrel and make it perfect. And if you made it too loose, you'd have to take small ones out and replace them with bigger ones. And if you made it too tight, you would have to either use a sledgehammer to get that last one in, or replace it, bigger one with a smaller one. And I never got good enough that I didn't need a sledgehammer. But there were people there who were. They could just see a cart and build a barrel. It was insane.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
So Brown-Forman steamed their barrels. So other folks don't do it that way. There's kind of two thoughts. One is steaming, right? You're just getting as much hot water in there as you can, and it will make the wood relatively pliable. And the other one is you kind of bend it while you toast / char it by spraying the outside and then slowly constricting the barrels together. Positive and negatives to both. Steam, once again, very hot, so it can destroy some flavor compounds in there. But that being said, it's not going super deep, whereas a char kind of is. So, fun stuff there.
Yeah.
Then after that, it was we would toast our barrels. They had a massive room. This entire job, toasting barrels. It's basically, if you've ever seen those tall yellow pylons that are designed to keep you from driving into like Target. Yeah. It basically looked like those, but they were just, self-contained ovens. So they would set the barrel on top of it, and it would give it the same toast all the way because it was the same temperature from top to bottom. Right. Then charring, they're flamethrowers. We use natural gas. So, yeah. Depending on what we were making, like we made the double oak barrels there. Mm-hmm. They didn't get charred very long. Normal stuff got charred twice as long as them, right? And then assemble the heads on, put the hoops, quality test, and ship.
Wow. I mean, it's crazy how much goes into just making a barrel. Like people just think, oh, it's just wood. You slap it together. It's not a big deal. But it's a science for sure. And whoever, I mean, and then once you perfect it, you just got to create the mold over and over again. So as long as you have good product to work with, and that's talking with Chris Conrad at Badmo. He's like, that's the issue that everyone is having is they're getting subpar wood because it doesn't meet the, and so like these bigger distilleries, like the ones you've worked for, they have the ability to throw out the ones they don't want because they're like, hey, I'm Brown Foreman, I can do what I want. I don't want this wood, you know. Whereas the smaller craft guys, they kind of got to pick what they can get because you're getting the leftovers from the guys anyway. So it's pretty crazy how wood makes such a huge difference in the whole whiskey manufacturing part of it. It's crazy.
So, two things. One, they still don't throw them out. They're just big enough that they can blend it out, so they care a little less. And two, yeah, I mean, the flavor that a barrel provides is, you know, people say it's somewhere between, you know, I've heard as high as 2/3, which I think is a bit much. Yeah. But, you know, down to 1/3, which I think is a bit low. But also, I mean, hey, if you're not aging that long, yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And it's crazy because when you start talking scotches and stuff, they know they're going to leave that stuff in there for 10, 12, 15, 20 years. And so they're not really getting as much wood impact. Whereas with bourbons being in that new oak, the impact of the wood is going to be substantial very fast. I don't know, like, you know, yeah, I know Elijah Craig has a 12-year and an 18-year, but like these are, you know, pretty special bottlings. Most of the bourbons coming out of Kentucky, wherever, most of them are between 6 and 8 years. Is that correct?
I might push that up to 10, right? Knob Creek kind of is a 9-year-old. You know, you got Russell's Reserve at 10. So some of the slightly more premiums skew that a little higher, but yeah, the majority of just, you know, buy it on the shelf because it has their name on it is probably like 4 to 6, maybe 8 on the higher end years old. But yeah, you were saying earlier, you know, first use to second use on a barrel drops it 80% of like extractable compounds. So Scotch knows they can age things 5 times longer than us on the first use. Right. And they'll use them 3 times. And then they have the choice of, you know, rejuvenating them if they want to. So
right. Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, that's crazy. That it always intrigues me, like the impact of the barrel. And then, you know, like when you're talking single barrels, you know, that takes it to a whole nother level because the variation drift between a barrel to barrel can be substantial. It can also normally it's only a 10 to 12% variation between barrels. Normally, I mean, you're going to get some weird ones out there and some unicorn barrels or whatever, but like is it because you're getting from one specific, I don't want to say farm of wood, but like if a cooperage is buying wood from a specific place, you know, I don't know what, like a forest. There we go. That's the word. A specific forest. Does that flavor profile follow through with the wood, or is it just every tree is different? Or do you even know that?
Well, I do, but there's like 3 answers to that question. Okay. So the first answer is the single biggest impact to change the flavor that a barrel provides is climate. And that includes where in a rick house you have it. So if it's, you know, near the top and a lot hotter or near the bottom and a lot cooler. So that's going to be the biggest impact on the flavor that a barrel provides. But yes, terroir is a thing in barrels. Absolutely. So you can get micro with it and say within, you know, certain biomes, certain forests do have different flavors that they provide because realistically what it is different nutrients and minerals in the soil will create different, you know, extractable compounds is what I'll call them, right? So the number one compound that you can extract out of a white oak is vanillin, like in the highest out of all of them in there. It just blows it out of the water, because you can pretty much get vanilla out of any bourbon. And if you look at what your body can actually taste, like there are a lot of other flavor compounds in there that you can taste at like lower parts per million, but there's always vanilla, because vanillin is everywhere in an oak tree. But if you look at the northern United States versus the southern United States, or even Canada versus the southern United States, is for where you're harvesting your trees from, that will greatly affect the percentages of extractable materials in it. So up north, they have a shorter growing season, and it normally makes a tighter grain. And that affects it, interestingly, because those rings in trees, it's the quick versus slow growing season, aka spring versus summer. And in the summer, the cell walls become a lot thicker because they're trying to become hardier. And those are where all your flavor compounds come from. So the more dark wood you have in comparison to your light wood, the more flavor there will be. But also the different components in like the percentages and ratios will be in there, because it requires more cellulose to make those darker rings, because that's really where the structure comes from. But cellulose also bonds with hemicellulose and lignin. So it can get wild. I forget what book I had in there, but there's like a 30% difference in the most extreme case between percentage or proportions of cellulose between north and south. So that's
a lot.
It's a large difference.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And then the third little anecdote for about that is, like, yes, if you're trying to maintain flavor consistency, getting it from the same spot is important. So Glenmorangie actually owns their own forest here in America that they harvest all of their wood from, because they are trying to kind of establish that terroir of that area, and that they know that those barrels will behave that way.
That to me is very intriguing, that a Scotch company who could care less about the wood up front, they're like, give it to the bourbon guys and then we'll take it and make some good stuff out of it. But it's so crazy that they care that much, because they want their flavor profile to be that honed in to where they're like, this is our forest. And then we give it to I don't know who they give it to put a bourbon in first. Okay. And then they take it back. They're like, it's my wood. You're renting the barrel. Then we get it back.
Effectively, yeah. So that's fun. Also, oh my God, working with their wood was glorious, because they wanted theirs air dried, much longer than Jack Daniels did. So like you'd get it and it just handled like it was butter. Like you felt like you could get out there with like a dull brick and shape the wood into like whatever you wanted to, compared to like some of the stuff we used to make other barrels.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, and we don't have to talk about wood all night because I know you talk about it a lot.
I like it. You probably shouldn't say that, like on the internet, like, I like wood, but
I like wood. I get it. But one other thing, so after you quit, moved on from Brown-Forman and Heaven Hill, what are you doing now? I guess
so now, right, mostly it is Pat and Mike at my whiskey den. We try to bring on, interesting makers, especially craft, because really they're the ones who are doing the most interesting things. Because realistically, if Heaven Hill's like, hey, let's do an experiment, it's 125,000 gallon experiment. That's not small, right? So they are not going to be the ones who are leading innovation and doing all these wild experiments, right? And that's really the most fun for me, right? Like, no offense, if I just was like, I'm done, I'm just going to pick one and drink that for the rest of my life and nothing else, it would be very boring, but, it'd probably be also pretty cheap. So it is what it is there. I do the tastings and fun, kind of classes, stuff like that on occasion. It's just one of those fun things where like I have a day job.
Mm-hmm.
That's not fun, like talking about whiskey and, talking about
Right.
wood. So, got to pay the bills, got to have the insurance, stuff like that.
Oh, believe me, I know. I know exactly what you mean. But I guess, where was I going? So I've had people ask me multiple times, and this could be a 2-hour topic, and we don't have to make it 2 hours. But there's this huge boom in bourbon right now, and everybody's talking about it. It's a huge thing. The issue is, and I've seen it, and I know other people have seen it. It's at its pinnacle, and it's fixing to dip off. I feel it's fixing to dip. There's people out there buying bourbons for ridiculous amounts of money with not a care in the world. They're buying 20 deep of Pappy 23 just to say they have them on their shelf. They're doing these things because they have an unlimited budget. So what it's going to do is it's going to cap the market, and therefore it's going to – now, is it going to affect the whiskey distilleries? Yeah, a little bit probably, but is it good for the whiskey? I hate to say a whiskey purist, but for the whiskey purists like us that just want to enjoy it and be able to get one of those bottles eventually. How do you feel about that?
It's a complex subject, right? Yeah, you could talk about it for hours. So yeah, if the market constricts, it's going to be craft that pays the price, which makes me sad because craft is what leads innovation, and it is what really drives me to drink these days, which actually it's my girlfriend. I mean, hey. But like I want the next great thing, right? And the next great thing is not Pappy 23. It's been the great thing for 30 years. Like we can move on from, or I can move on from that. Right. That being said, so one of the things they teach you in the whiskey sommelier school is like you can be absolutely great at business and have a terrible product. And you can also have an amazing product and be terrible at business. And both of those folks are going to be able to succeed while bourbon is booming. And they will both fail when it stops. Absolutely. So those folks who are great at business with bad products that fail, I'm not sad to see them go. I'm going to be blunt, right? Like if I don't like drinking your product and I can no longer drink your product, that is not a bad thing for me. It's going to be those distillers that I do like their product, but they, for some reason, something in their business plan didn't go according to plan or didn't pan out or something like that fail. That's going to be what I don't like.
Right.
A little bit of a detour, but it is what
I know. Sorry. And I didn't mean to bring the show down, but the issue, there's going to be a lot of craft distilleries that'll be fine. They're established. They're good. They have a great product for a reasonable price. We all know those, but and maybe it's not bad to, I hate to say it like this, to cut some of the fat, because in Texas, there has been an insurgence of new Texas distilleries. So I'm not saying they're not all great and they're not all doing cool stuff, but do we really need, in our state, 60 distilleries making the same product over and over again? Some would say yes. Some would say that competition is good and it pushes competition. But at the same time, a lot of these aren't in it for the right reason. They're not in it to, I wouldn't say make the best product, but like they're in it on the monetary side, like kind of like you're saying, they're in it to make the money because they see the boom. It's a hard road to it's hard because us whiskey lovers, we want to be able to support the big guys, which they're going to be fine no matter what, because they've got contract with millions of dollars of whiskey going in and out. But when it comes down to the craft guys like Westward, right? these guys are doing some amazing stuff. And yeah, they'll probably be okay, but they're going to take a hit. And, it's kind of sad because everybody's looking for the Wellers and the this and the that and the, even worse than that. But I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but I just wanted to see kind of your opinion on it, because to me it hurts my heart, because there's a lot of people getting into whiskey right now, and that's part of what my podcast is about. It's about teaching them about the whiskey and how to enjoy it, stuff like that, and it makes it very difficult for me to recommend bottles to people, because I don't know if they're going to be there in 3 to 5 years. It makes it hard.
It's rough. Plus, if you're a craft distillery and you have the same flavor profile for 3 to 5 years, that is an accomplishment that should not be undersold in any way,
Right,
shape,
absolutely.
or form. That is incredibly difficult.
Yes.
Like, they have teams of people picking from thousands of barrels to desperately try and keep, the flavor profile of these huge brands the same, and are failing.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I do think that some need to fail, right? But it's also competition is good. And if everybody wins, yeah, you'll just promote bad whiskey. But that being said, right, you talked about Westward. Like, I was sitting here and I've got my bottle of Andalusia Striker, right? And it's just like, I never don't want to have Andalusia.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But, Lord knows they've got a small still. So it's not like they're going to be able to pump out a barrel a minute if they need to.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I mean, even with their expansion that they've done, they're still not able to do that.
if their expansion lets them to hit all of Texas, I'll be amazed. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, I don't know. I don't know where it goes. I'm not excited. I hate to say I'm excited, but I'm excited to see hopefully the monetary value of some of these whiskeys to come down a little bit. That would be nice. Just for the simple fact that, and I'm not saying I want every one of them. I'm just saying I don't want everything to go to lottery. I don't want everything to go to the Dallas Buyers Club. You know what I mean? Like, I want to get a chance to get something, except in an auction or something like that where you're paying 4 times the price. So, okay. So from here, I'm gonna try and raise it up a little bit. So if you had a buddy of yours who was interested in whiskey, would you recommend the Wizard Academy for them?
Ooh, so that depends.
Okay.
The first thing that depends on, I hate to be that guy, is money, right? Like, if you ain't got the money, you ain't got the money. It's an amazing, fun time, but you got to choose where you spend your disposable income.
It's an investment.
It is an investment. So if you're going there for fun and not to try and like get a job or something like that, it will be a blast, and you will be like, this is the best X amount of dollars I've ever spent.
Right.
If you are going there to get further in the industry, you have to understand what they are providing, right? Like, they are different than Edinburgh Whiskey Academy. They are different than Moonshine University. They are different than, like, everything, right? Like, they are not a college, whatever. So they are an advertising school that realized, hey, we love whiskey, and whiskey advertising kind of sucks, and we'd like to change that. And you can't advertise something you don't understand. So we're going to give you a foundation in whiskey and then kind of teach you good advertising practices and
how to sell.
Fun stuff. Yeah. So if that sounds fun and that sounds like the career you're trying to get into, then look into it. Right. Moonshine University, with their 6-day distiller course, they are teaching you how to open your own distillery. So if you're like, I don't really want to open my own distillery, it might not be the course for you. If you are like, I don't really care about selling whiskey, I just want to get nerdy with it, whiskey, the Whiskey Academy probably isn't that
right.
the thing you're looking for. If you're like, I hate bourbon, neither of them are what you're going for. You probably want to talk to the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy or something like
Absolutely.
that. Like here in Kentucky, they've started certificates in distilling, right? So they're not full associate's degrees. You can minor in them if you are getting a degree from there, but it's, something like 10 classes. And it talks about, like fermentation and distillation and stuff like that. And that might be what you're going for,
Right.
As much as I rant against higher education in my personal life on a very regular basis.
That's funny. But and so that just goes to show that like the whiskey education is out there. You just got to go find what's right for you. And one of the reasons I chose the Wizard Academy, and you can tell me yours as well, is I wanted to get better at doing what I'm doing right now. Talking about whiskey. Obviously, I just came off of chemo, so I still get a little chemo head every once in a while. So that's one thing I'm dealing with as well. So that sucks. But
you can blame it on your whiskey. Just I can be like, I drink a lot of whiskey.
But and that's why I got into it, because I had a little bit of the knowledge, and it gave me more knowledge, but it also gave me the prowess to speak about it and not be afraid to be wrong, and to be able to speak with, how do you say fervor, to speak with fervor about it, and then be like, oh, I was wrong, I'm sorry, let me correct that, and then we'll go on. So like that's my thing. Like, I'm not saying that I know everything, and I don't want to know. Well, I do want to know everything eventually, but it's just one of those things where, like, yeah, I mean, this was the right path for me. Moonshine U is also a very good path. I've thought about just, opening a distillery and stuff like that. Obviously, the monetary part of opening a distillery is a huge hurdle. So the distiller's course, a week long, you can do that and then be prepared for that. And most of the time, if you're really nerdy into whiskey, and if you're listening to this show, you probably are, most of the stuff that they're going to talk about at Moonshine. Obviously, Moonshine is hands-on. You're going to get the course down. So that part is super cool. But what made you pick the Wizard Academy as well? Did I already say that?
Maybe. I'm also drinking whiskey, so we can blame chemo and whiskey at this point. Like when I first chose it, I was trying to get anything that would make me, an appealable employee, right?
I remember
they were a little cheaper. Also, they were at the right time. That was the other thing, right? Because it's not like continuous classes,
right?
Plus, watching the videos, I was like, this seems fun. It might be great to become like a whiskey marketer of some kind, right? Like just a rep or something like that. And it's like, okay, so if I get this and maybe finish my associate's degree or something like that, I can probably be a rep somewhere for somebody. And then I looked at how much like entry-level rep pay was, and I was like, oh, I made a poor decision. I think at the time it was like $30,000 a year, and I was like, that's like $14 an hour. Great.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people need to understand when they go into a college courses and think they're going to get all these different degrees. Look at what the pay scale is on some of those degrees, because it's my buddy got a master's in, oh God, what was it? Underwater basket weaving or something stupid like that, and like the gross median income on it was like $28,000 or something. And I'm like, so you spent 4 years of your life trying to go to college for this, and your job doesn't make any money. It's just but it's not always about making money. It's about being happy, right? So
I've been happy poor, and I've been happy middle class, and I've been unhappy poor, and I've been unhappy middle class. And I would take middle class over poor on both of those. I'm going to be 100% honest.
Absolutely.
I'll lay that out there right now.
That is true. That is true. And one thing, and then we'll close it on this, and I'll let you do your final remarks as well. But one thing that, after going through what I've gone through these past couple of months, one thing that I've realized, and one thing that this has put into focus for me, is somebody told me, and it might have, I don't even know who it was. It's not live to work, it's work to live.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you're just basically trying to get enough funds to pay your bills so that you can live your life to the best of your ability, and hopefully have some good whiskey along the way. But yeah, I mean, and people fret too much on the small stuff. Like we were talking about the bourbon going down and stuff like that. Yeah, it could happen. It can not happen. Who knows? Who cares? Really, it doesn't really affect. I mean, unless you're directly tied to it, it doesn't really affect any of us. It might make it harder to get bottles and stuff like that. But unless you're financially tied to it in the stock market or something, then it might make a difference. But yeah, I want to err more on the side of positivity with all this, and just be like, maybe it'll be a chance for us to get some cool stuff. Who knows?
So I don't think it'll be a crash like it was last time, right? Where it was just like, hey, we went down to like 5 distilleries, right? But it has to constrict, right? You can't have something with unlimited growth.
No,
so,
you can't. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It is what it is. All right. So do you want to give everybody your socials, or where they can find you, or if they want to check out the Whiskey Den or anything like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, my name's Mitch Wettle, Wettle. I'm on Facebook. You're welcome to reach out to me there. You can find me on my Whiskey Den. That's really the easiest place, because I am there every Monday at 9, and you can chat. We're live. You can, I mean, so long as we're not interviewing someone, you're welcome to throw out random questions. If we're interviewing someone, like, be respectful, you know.
Exactly.
Other than that, if you want to email me, mwettle@gmail.com. If you say terrible things, I'll just delete the email. It's not, anything wild like that. But yeah, but definitely check out my Whiskey Den. It's fun. That's why I do it. On a slightly positive note, huge shout out for beating cancer, and also hopefully defending your championship in the chili cook-off coming up here shortly. Not sure when this will come out, so I might look a fool, or I might look like I'm a great victor.
You won't look a fool. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen, because I was talking to my wife today about that, and I was saying, man, I'm thinking about tweaking the recipe and blah blah. She goes, "Are you going to tweak the recipe? Really? Like, this is the award-winning?" I said, "But yeah, but what if it was a fluke? And so I don't know. It makes me very nervous, because like when they put you on that pedestal, you're like, oh crap, I gotta make sure I deliver. But no, dude, I really appreciate it. It's a blessing to be in this time of my life, and to have done the things that I have done. Obviously, I had a lot of support and a lot of help along the way. And that's a big part of my boost to get through this. But yeah, I mean, for those of y'all who don't know Mitch and or anything, he was a major donor to the Whiskey Vault. I mean, I don't even want to know how many bottles. Do you even know how many bottles you donated?
It was 50 some.
Okay.
Yeah, and then so I brought down another 50. Or I brought enough down to make it 100. And then they went, "Oh, we're not accepting donations for the Bastards Ball." And I was so miffed, because I was like, I'm going to cement myself in like awkward history, right? In this tiny little internet corner. Like they're going to be like, "Here's another one from Mitch. Is it going to be good? Probably not, because he does like torturing us," right? Like, because when you're trying to donate 100 bottles, it's like, hey, is that one $11? Grab that one, like. So
what did you do with those 50 bottles?
They're on my butt. They're back here. I'm drinking them now.
I mean, I'm so close to Austin. You could have just drove them to my house.
Well, you know.
I mean, I don't know if I would want them either. I
will say I have made a couple trips in my life where it's one of those things. If you ran into the back of my car, there would be a fireball, and not a small one. Like because that was. I brought down 50 to donate, and then while I was down there, I bought all sorts of Texas whiskey while I was down there because we went to DFW, Houston, Austin, Blanco, San Antonio, right? And I of course went up to Iron Root, and so it was just like I was kind of expecting to leave like a few of these boxes, but behind. Okay, well, can all the suitcases fit in the back seat, or do we have to, because I don't think we should put any of these in particular boxes in the back seat.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Oh, yeah. That's amazing.
Driving up 65 in a car like that, and you're just like, I got like 200 pounds of whiskey back there.
That's good. That's good. So, with the Whiskey Den, have y'all done any like single barrel picks or anything like that?
So not yet. Before I joined, they were supposed to, and something happened that I won't get into that stopped that. But we're members of the Bar Cart Co-op, so that includes Alan Bishop. So his 3 podcasts now, because he's got Distiller's Talk. If you have Ghosts, you have everything, and the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute, and then you've got Kevin with his Bourbon Turntable, and then you have David Levine with Whiskey My Wedding Ring, and he does picks, and all of his are so good. So like if you really want to do picks, like he's kind of the guy to go through. I think Mike, Pat, and I are all like kind of middle-age-ish, and it's like that's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
And David's. So the joke is David's willing to do things we're not. All of that work is one of them.
Yeah, exactly. No, I always ask because it's hard if you don't have a group of people. It's hard to get a pick. It's hard to get people to respond back to an email, let alone get a barrel of whiskey from them. For a proper amount, they're not trying to sell you for $20,000. So so yeah, because I'm not Irene Tan, I can't just walk in somewhere and be like, I want that. Okay, it's yours. I can't do that.
It'd be nice if we all were though. Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway. Okay, well, we are going to wrap this one up, and I appreciate you so much for coming on, bud. And it was a lot of fun, and we will have to do it again in the future, and we'll talk about some other weird something else for sure. Stick on real fast, obviously. But, yeah, I will catch y'all on the flip side, and until next time, where am I at? Keep your spirits up.